Here's an article in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition which says that a high ratio of dietary animal to vegetable protein increases the rate of bone loss and the risk of fracture in menopausal women. And then they compare women who eat animal protein versus vegetable protein, and they come to the conclusion that the more plant protein you eat, the stronger your bones are. Interesting. So can what you eat affect your bone structure? And the answer is yes. So there's more than meets the eye to the old adage, you are what you eat. Well, I was involved in a very interesting experiment where the industry found that sheep that were stall-fed, in other words, sheep that didn't run around and get exercise but were just stall-fed, like many sheep are today, and many of them, of these creatures, receive animal protein in their diet. Because the theory is, a protein is a protein is a protein. What does it matter if it comes from a plant source or from an animal source? And I'd given a lecture where I said it makes a vast difference whether it's from an animal or from a plant. Because animal protein and plant protein differs in its amino acid composition. So animal protein will have far more sulfur-containing amino acids and will be far more acid-forming than plant protein. So plant protein will tend to give you an alkaline system, whereas animal protein will tend to give you an acid system. And because this has to be regulated via calcium from the bone, it could explain why these stall-fed animals that received animal protein developed weak legs. And they said, that's impossible, can't be. So I said, let's do an experiment, which we then did. So we took young weaned rams and we divided them into groups and we fed them different dietary regimes. Now the one group received 12% protein levels, all plant-based. So basically their diet consisted largely of alfalfa. The next group received exactly the same diet with 3% animal protein added in the form of fish meal. The next group received exactly the same diet with 5% animal protein added. And the next group received the same diet with 8% animal protein diet. So you had incremental increase in animal protein. And then to double check, we took another group and we took the same basic diet, but we added 8% plant protein in the form of gluten. So here were these different groups. Now, what happened in their development? Well, fascinatingly, when you look at skewness of the legs, with 50% meaning there is no skewness, either this way or the other way. As you added animal protein, the legs got skewer. So as the concentration increased, the legs got skewer. But when you added plant protein, it didn't happen. So here is a normal looking sheep, shaven so that you can see it nicely, good bone structure, nice structure. This one, 5%. The legs are slightly bowed. This one, 8%, total catastrophe. In fact, this sheep, as you can see, my colleague is lifting him up because he wouldn't stand by himself. So when we analyzed all these bones and the structures, you can see what it looks like, much deformity here in the joints, etc. We looked at the bone calcium to phosphorus ratio and saw that the ratio calcium to phosphorus actually decreased as we added animal protein. So there was less calcium in the bone. So obviously the animal was releasing calcium from the bone to neutralize the additional acid, and this caused bone weakness and deformity. Not only that, we looked at calcium loss in the urine and the stools. And this is now only the top group, the 20% protein, whereby the animal protein had 8% animal protein and the other one had all plant protein, either from alfalfa and gluten. And if you look at the calcium loss in the urine and the stool, the animal protein group lost more than double the amount of calcium in the urine than the one that received the plant protein. If we look at the deformity, the animal protein one was highly deformed compared to the other group. And if you looked at the calcium-phosphorus ratio, there was a massive difference. The structure was far better in the group that received the plant protein. Now, I'm not going to discuss this graph in detail, just this one is interesting. We wanted to compare apples with apples and pears with pears, so we wanted to look at a specific growth period. Now, you can do that by giving the animal an injection of tetracycline which marks the bone, and you can see it under fluorescent light. And then we let the animal grow for 10 days, give it another marker, and then under the microscope you have two lines, and you have exactly 10 days bone growth in between the two, because these were growing animals. And this is the tetracycline double label experiment. And then we looked at the anatomy of the bone, and you can make a mathematical formula where you can look at the structure of the bone to see whether it has developed into a good bone lattice with normal histological features, or whether it is weakened and deformed. And what we found was fascinating. This is the 12% plant protein group, and if you look at all the formulas attached to this mathematical model, which I don't have to go into, the bone structure was perfect in strength, durability, everything that goes together with bone anatomy. If you added 3% animal protein, the structure deteriorated. If you added 5%, it deteriorated more. If you added 8% animal protein, it was a catastrophe. If you added 8% plant protein, perfection again. So the microanatomy of the bone was altered by the amount of protein that was taken in the form of animal protein. Now, the fascinating thing is that people say, now excuse me, this is a sheep. It's not supposed to eat animal protein. The interesting thing is, if you do the same thing with a dog, or with a cat, or with a pig, or any other animal, you get exactly the same result. Which leads to one conclusion, and that is that all of these animals were actually designed to eat plant protein. Fascinating.